I came out to my father as having a lover, female lover, female love. That my kind of relationship with my family on the continent of Africa is kind of a little bit stunted because it's not quite culturally acceptable to go to my various family members, their home in Lagos when my father doesn't speak to me. So that's for me how it affects me is directly through kind of family relationships and broken family and stunted family and estranged family. But at the same time, I really treasure and celebrate the support of my family from Africa who live in Britain. But what was very exciting about touring my play, Much of the Antarctic, around the Southern Africa, 5 Southern African countries, was that play, without going into too much detail about the play itself, that play featured a love story between two women. And it was set in the mid-19th century, in 1848, around the same time when the word homosexual was invented. Homosexuality, of course, is a European idea. It's a European word. It's invented by a Swiss doctor. So there you go. So I wanted to make that play set in that time about these two lovers, but without being constrained by the language of homosexuality, gay, lesbian. None of these words were mentioned in the play, not because I was censoring myself, just because they weren't relevant to the period. And also none of those things were particularly mentioned in the publicity. But when we premiered the show in Botswana, people absolutely loved the play. The audience was packed out. People really loved the play. People felt with the relationships. People understood the relationship. Totally got it. Everybody in every village, in every family in Africa has an uncle. That uncle there, with his friend who never got married, or that auntie who lives with auntie, or whoever. We're everywhere, in every family, and everybody knows we are in every family. And it was only when my last performances were in Malawi, it was only when I was interviewed just as I was leaving Malawi, that one of the journalists interviewing me, picked up on the gay story, the story of these two lovers, and started to ask me about personal questions. And then I thought, aha, okay, this is more than just taking your nice little play around Southern Africa. You have a responsibility here in terms of you have a responsibility not only to your own art, but also to tell the truth about yourself, especially when so many people in Malawi or Botswana can't tell the truth about themselves without the threat of violence, possibly. And so then I talked about that, and then I realised that this was the first openly gay play, as far as I know, and I'd love to be corrected if it's not right, first openly gay play that I performed in Malawi. And then, then talking about that went into the newspapers. And then I started to think, which is why I'm here today actually, I'm going to wind up now. I really started to think, actually, that was a British Council supported project. And I'm there by virtue of the fact that, yes, I have a play to present, but I also have a British passport. And I thought to myself, I must use either the privilege or the insult of a British passport to speak my truth, and to use the protection of that to speak very, very openly about who I am and where I'm coming from. And also, actually, because of, in a sense, I mean, like a lot of people, a lot of colonised people, we're in a funny position. I'm in a really weird position. Yes, I speak against the history and the legacies of slavery and colonialism, but I have the privilege, all the pleasures, and all the freedoms, or whatever, we consider them freedoms, all of that stuff that comes with that British passport. And I have to, so I suppose how it impacts on those of us living outside of the continent with European passports is to use those passports in any way, shape or form, to use all of that to be able to speak freely about what's true for us. Not to impose any colonial idea, because we could be colonisers too, just because we're black doesn't mean we're not colonial. But to use what we've got to say what we need to say, respectfully, when invited.
I think what happens on the African continent in relation to gay people is it reaffirms the issue of the international nature of that struggle, and therefore ought to, and as is an example here today, inspire people in those countries to take an active engagement in seeking to tackle some of the issues that people face on the African continent. But I think also that, you know, African continent and the level of corruption in some African countries leads to that old tried and tested tactic in neoliberal nations, is that of scapegoating. That when things go wrong and, you know, you dip your hand in taking another few million to put in your Swiss bank account and get caught out, it's very easy to raise the flag of hatred. And that is done in very many African countries, not just in relation to gay communities, but to children and children's rights, witchcraft and children's rights. So we see it replicating time and time again. So I think it's enormously important that that is struggle. I think as a black man here in the United Kingdom of African diaspora, my grandfather stowed away from Sierra Leone to this country at the age of 14 in 1896. So I'm a fifth generation black Britisher from Moss Side in the north of the country. And the reason why I say that is because, A, I'm very firmly believe of being of African descent, part of that African diaspora, that the fight against racism is indivisible with the fight against homophobia. But secondly, that you have a responsibility as part of the African diaspora, as I said in my opening, to raise the issues of child hunger on the continent and so on and so forth, and this is another important issue in that regard. I think science having determined that the human race started on the African continent, we're all to some extent gay Africans to that extent. That might be a surprise to some of the white people in the room, but I'm sure we can organise counselling so that you can kind of get over that shock. Nevertheless, I think that very much why I'm delighted to be here is to be able to sort of nail the lie that there aren't black men in particular, straight good black men in particular, who are not alive to, responsive to, and welcoming of efforts to fight homophobia both in the United Kingdom and indeed farther abroad.